Welcome to the Created Worthy podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're here. On this show, I talk about creative processing and how to utilize it as a skill to bring peace, joy, and freedom into our chaotic lives. I also sit down with the most incredible guests as they share their stories, many of which for the very first time. We are all created worthy. Hello. Thanks for joining me on the Created Worthy podcast. Can you believe it? This is the season 2 finale. Today, I have a very special episode for you. We are going to be walking through a little creative processing session where my intention was simply to process Created Worthy. If you're new here, welcome. I am so glad you're here, and I hope you enjoy hearing about what makes Created Worthy unique and how I feel called to steward this podcast a little differently going into season 3. To those of you who have been tuning in from week to week, thank you so much. Your outpouring of love and support means the world to me, and I'm not just saying that. In a few minutes, I'm actually going to read some of the reviews and messages about Created Worthy. I think the best way to describe this show and to talk about the show is through your words, the ones who this show was created for. If nobody listened or took the step to share their story, previous guests, I see you, I would not be here. As I was processing doing this episode, I actually chose to go through these comments and reviews as my form of creative processing today. I know that this is something that I've needed to do for a long time. To give you a reminder of what creative processing is, it is a tool that activates one's creative mind in an intentional way. So you can use a prompt like the purpose of fill in your creative outlet is to process, fill in your certain intention. The reason that I believe creative processing is such a powerful tool is it's something that we all already use. And when you have the words for what you're doing, then you can actually utilize it as a skill. And that's something that I have been really passionate about. It's something that has helped me a lot in my own healing and throughout my own discovery of my mission and my purpose and my calling. Creativity is obviously a really big deal to me. So I believe that it serves everyone to dive into your creative mind so that you can process through the things that life hands us and that God allows throughout our lives, whether they're good or bad. We need time to process them. I dive a little bit deeper into all the ins and outs of creative processing in a few different episodes throughout this podcast. But for today, I just want to remind you guys about dual processing that some of us, specifically if you have ADHD or a brain that needs dual creative outlets engaged in order to process through anything, which is how my brain works. And so I wanted to share with you my process and the prompt that I used to process through these reviews and messages and then in turn writing about it. So for me today, the purpose of reading through reviews and messages and writing about it is to process the impact that has been and will be done through Created Worthy. The result of creative processing, which from experience is usually immediate, is clarity and renewed excitement, desire, determination for that which you just processed through. Recording this episode is the result of my creative processing time today. And maybe it'll turn into a blog post later down the road, but nonetheless, it was the clarity and desire that came from intentional processing time that brings me to the microphone today. To be honest, I almost just skipped another week of releasing an episode due to more life stuff that has come up, legitimate life things that has made it hard to put out the next episode in the lineup that we have. But I'm so glad that the Lord convicted me and said, no, there's something you need to do for your podcast this week. And this was it. And I'm so glad that He also guided me through the processing so that I could figure out what I need to share with you guys, the listeners, because again, this show is for you. So as I said in the beginning, I'm going to just start by reading some of the reviews about Created Worthy. This first one is titled Beyond Amazing, and it's from its_Mimi_. They said, "This podcast is so inspirational. I've realized that I use a creative processing method in my life while listening to these stories. And I've realized how important it is to have a positive hobby or activity to do while dealing with high emotions. Thank you so much for helping me learn more about myself." Wow. Thank you so much for taking the time to write that. And I pray and hope that this continues to be a podcast that you tune back into and learn more about creative processing and also hear stories that encourage and uplift you. So thank you so much for taking the time to write that. It means the world to me. The next review is written by Kristen Affinity Media, which I believe is Kristen Day. She was a guest on the first season in episode 16, and that was an incredible conversation. Her review is titled Like Chatting with Your Best Friend. She said, "Listening to this podcast is like having a much needed conversation with your bestie after not seeing them for a year. The constant reminder that where you are is the right place to be, and the honest, that literally happened to me last week feeling you get from these stories is incredibly uplifting and a great reminder that we are all in this together." Oh, I love that so much. I've actually had quite a few people reach out and be like, "I feel like I'm in the room with you talking to these incredible women." And I'm like, yes. That is what I've always hoped, is that when you listen and tune into this podcast, you would feel like you are a part of it, and that you are welcome and that you are seen. So thank you so much, Kristen, for that incredible review. The next one is by Rebecca Newell. She titled it Such a Beautiful Listen. She said, "Danielle is incredibly insightful, thoughtful, and her joy and positivity is infectious. Her story is inspiring, and I loved learning about creative processing." Oh my gosh, it's so awkward, to be completely honest, for me to read things about myself specifically. But I will say that I think words of affirmation have kind of turned into one of my primary love languages, which is crazy to me because I never used to be like that. And also, acts of service is my primary love language, and going and writing a review is an act of service to me. So reading this review totally fills my cup. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your review. The next one is titled Danielle is so amazing and truly anointed, which again, I'm like, oh, cringe. Why am I reading these? But it is by Cheyenne. I actually know Cheyenne as well. She has been such a huge encouragement to me. And I'm going to go ahead and read her review. She said, "Listening to Danielle's story has been so impactful and beautiful. The way God has grown her and made her into such a beacon of light and hope is mesmerizing. I highly recommend tuning into her podcast and letting her wisdom pour into your heart." Oh my gosh. I know that I have so much room to grow, and there is so much more wisdom that I want to bestow, but I want it to be wisdom that comes from the source. So I pray that as I continue to grow, that the Lord would really speak through me, and that my words would not convolute what he's trying to say. So that is definitely a prayer of my heart. I'm so glad that this has been so encouraging for you. Thank you so much, Cheyenne. The next review is titled Absolutely Love Listening to These, and it's written by Sammy Chula. She wrote, "So many powerful and beautiful stories full of everything relatable. Danielle is a beautiful soul inside and out, and to hear her powerful story and listen to her open the platform up for so many other incredible journeys. It's been such a blessing and encouragement to listen to. Thank you for opening your heart and allowing others to do so through your show." Oh my goodness, Sammy. Thank you so much for taking the time to write that. Again, that is my heart for the show. And I do believe that being able to have this platform and steward this platform well and to build up other people and allow them to have a space to tell their stories will always, always be a central mission of Created Worthy. This next message that I want to read is actually from a guest that was on this season, Nikki Pointer, who totally showed up and shared her story in entirety for the very first time. And that I know was something that she was really nervous about. But she did it and she felt called to do it. And the blessings that have come even just since then, and not just from being on the show and sharing her story, but just, I think, a little bit from the confidence that she gained from being able to be like, this is who I am and this is what I've gone through and I'm going to keep going. I think that courage has driven her to continue making hard decisions, and God has opened so many incredible doors for her. She was talking about how she had endometriosis, and I know on the second episode we shared an opportunity for you to actually support her and to donate to a fundraiser that had been set up to help fund her endometriosis surgery. I have a little bit of an update about that. She did have the surgery, and thanks to generous donors, she received over $30,000 to help cover the surgery and all necessary expenses that surgery entailed. So that is a little bit of an update. And now I want to read to you what she said right after the episode was posted. She said, back in the beginning of December, I had the honor of being one of my best friend's podcast guests. Part 1 of my story dropped today. I remember waking up that morning and almost canceling. It was honestly the last thing I wanted to do. I had just missed one of my other best friend's weddings a few days prior. I had been in the ER with cysts on my ovaries and was in excruciating pain, and finding the strength to even enter into a conversation about sharing about my life felt daunting in the moment because of my overall state of being. But something in me felt so strongly that I had to do this, and the timing was spot on. And I could not let the enemy talk me out of it. Something I wrote that day was, but are you letting love in? Those 7 words have grounded me in my deepest panic and hurricane winds of life this year. They have whispered to me in the chaos and confusion that there is still hope. There is still love. There is still breath in these lungs of mine, and everything is going to be okay. Healing is frustrating, and some days are great and others are full of waves and grief and navigating pain and wanting to throw in the towel. But those words have been a steadfast reminder. Choosing to let love in those moments, despite it all, is the strongest and bravest thing you can do. Part 1 is heavy and a lot to take in, but I'm so stoked for part 2 to drop next Monday, letting love in, because God's faithfulness, grace, and love always wins and gets the last say. Clearly, Nikki is a writer. And prior to her writing this, on the day that we recorded, she had not written in a while. So even just the gift of being able to have this platform that encouraged somebody to engage in creative processing, to process their intention of coming on this show, is a win, a huge win. It makes everything worth it. And I've heard from so many of you that you've been encouraged or have taken steps to engage in creative processing. Or some of you have even told me that you have felt ready to come and share your story. And I'm here for that. That's what I feel called to do. So thank you again to all of you who listened, who have written reviews, who have sent messages. There are so many more that I could read. And I never want to take that for granted. I want to make space and time to say thank you because you have made space and time to listen. And that's a big deal to me. So we're going to shift a little bit, and I'm just going to talk about a little bit of a life update and a Created Worthy update. So Created Worthy will hopefully be changing a little bit and shifting in the coming months. I'm starting a new program with somebody who I've been following for years. She grew her podcast into this beautiful ministry. For me, ministry has always been my end goal. So being able to work with her and having that door open is a really big deal to me. And I'm excited to see what the Lord does with that. So in this season, I will be working hard to focus in on what the Lord wants me to do with this platform. If you follow me on social media, you may know that I've been going through a pretty big career shift, or whatever we want to call it. Long story short, I was working with somebody who turned out to not be the person that I thought she was. I dedicated all of my work and time to make this person's mission a reality, only to find out that their mission was built on a false reality. This really made me readjust everything and just reconsider everything that I was doing, how I was doing it, who I'm doing it for, and how I will continue to try to create an impact in the future. During this time, we also went through our second failed infertility treatment. More about that in episode 35 that released a couple weeks ago. And we also have been walking through a custody battle that I'm still not ready to talk about and probably never will be publicly. And I think that's okay. But I wanted to just let you guys know that that's where I've been at for the last few months. Yes, we've still been putting out episodes for the most part, other than last week. And needless to say, these last few months have obviously been really challenging and honestly have kind of knocked me on my bum and completely wiped out all of our emergency savings that we had been building for the last few years. So for a while, it's just kind of felt like we were drowning and like I suddenly had no direction on how to move forward in my career, in growing our family, and in protecting the child that we already do have. I just kept telling those who were like closest to me, all of my friends, that I was walking through a season of no's. So survival was truly the priority. My prayer for this whole year has just been that God would close the doors that I'm not supposed to walk through in clear and direct ways, and that He would open the right doors in the same way. Oh boy, has He been faithful to answer that prayer. So where does that leave us now? Well, I don't fully know, but I am happy to report that doors have finally started to open in clear and direct ways. God has been faithful to that as well. I've decided to take on a few graphic client projects. Shout out to Jackie. Thank you for kicking my butt into gear and helping me gain my footing again. As I mentioned before, I am also starting a new program for the next 12 weeks in which I have set the intention of streamlining all of my services, products, podcast, and writing, everything that I've done and worked on over the last over 4.5 years of building my business, streamlining all of that into something that actually makes sense to you and to anyone else who I might cross paths with. If you've been wondering what exactly I do, me too. I've done too many things. I am the perfect example of not niching down and that causing a lot of burnout and overwhelm time and time again. And it is time for that cycle to stop. As for the future of Created Worthy, again, I just want to say thank you guys so much for being here. I will try to keep you all up to date on the happenings of Created Worthy and all of the things that may or may not be changing. I will do all of that through the Created Worthy Instagram page, which is new. I haven't even talked about it on here, which I think just points to the fact that I've been all over the place and it's time to start streamlining. So with that being said, you can go check out the new Created Worthy Podcast Instagram page. It's just at Created Worthy Podcast, which will also be in the show notes. As far as next steps go, I am thinking about taking a little break from recording so that I can focus in on clarifying the heartbeat of this show and streamlining the offerings of my business. Obviously, it's a priority for our family for me to be making and generating an income. I have lots of different things that have gone on, and I haven't streamlined very many of them. And so it's time for me to do that. this next 12 weeks is like a race for me. I have to figure out whether this business is something that really can and will support my family. And if it's not, then I need to look at alternative routes in my career, including potentially going back to a corporate job. To be honest again, it completely pains my soul to even say that because I've worked really, really hard to build the business that I do have, not in the best way. Yes, admittedly, I know that, but I am praying, and I would ask that if the Lord puts it on your heart to pray for us as our family is going through obviously quite a few things, that would be incredible. It would mean the world to us. We know that God has a plan and that his plan will be good, and we trust in his will and his way, even if it looks differently than what I had hoped and expected, which it has time and time again, and he has still been faithful. So if you think about it or God puts it on your heart, we would be so grateful for your prayers. So during this time where I'm taking a little break again, I will tell you my goal is for this break to be no longer than 2 months. I just want to encourage you to dig into your own creative processing outlets and invite God into that time as well. Hesitation or resistance is unfortunately completely natural, but as I talked about in the resistance versus conviction episode, it's when we push through that and lean into the uncomfortableness, which, by the way, I know is not a word, but we're going to use it anyway, that we experience growth, freedom, and healing, which I think is something that we all ultimately desire. If you've never tried it, just do it. Remember, done beats perfect, and honestly, there is no perfect when it comes to creating. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me on my personal Instagram page at Danielle Damrell. That's where I hang out the most. And all right, friends. Well, I love you guys. And just don't forget, you are created worthy. So go shine your light, share your love, and tell your story because it matters and it changes lives. You've got this. Thank you so much for listening to the Created Worthy podcast. If you want to connect more, you can follow along with me over at Danielle Damrell or Damrell Creative Co. on Instagram and Facebook. All the links to today's topics are in the show notes, and you can also find a link to my Patreon, which is where you can help support my mission on this show and keep it going. Ratings and reviews really do matter, so make sure to hook me up with 5-star review. Any less, I would rather hear your opinions over email. So anyway, if this episode resonated with you at all, share the love, send it to a friend, or post it on your social media. But don't forget to tag me so I see it and can share it too. I hope all of you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you on the flip side.